Please use the side entrance. You're on the standby list, the staff member said coldly, glancing at the worn shoulders of Raymond's old military uniform. Raymond stammered, "But I have an invitation." No one listened. Right behind him, a group of young guests walked in and were welcomed like celebrities. Suddenly, he became invisible. Some days begin like any other, then suddenly shift direction like a strange gust of wind. For Raymond Lee, that morning was one of those days. He was sitting in his shabby motel room on the west side of the city, where the walls were stained with old cigarette smoke and the wooden floor groaned with every step. Holding a plastic cup of coffee, Raymond gazed idly at the sunlight filtering through the blinds. He still kept the habit of waking up early, just like in his military days, though now no one was checking his bed corners or timing his departures. The pale cream envelope lay humbly in the rusted mailbox at the foot of the stairs. At first, he thought it was another insurance flyer or a debt notice, things often sent to older folks without much standing. But no, the elegant embossed lettering and the blue ink stamp made him pause. Official invitation from a major corporation he'd only ever seen on TV commercials. Inside was a formal card that read, "We respectfully invite Mr. Raymond Lee, veteran of the Iraq War, to attend the Heroes Appreciation Gala at the Bell Monarch Hotel, rooftop level downtown. The event will be broadcast live with attendance from top leaders, celebrities, and members of the press." Raymond read it 3 times, stunned. How many years had it been since he quietly left the service? How many years living with restless dreams, sometimes gunfire, sometimes the faces of fallen comrades? And now, a card with his name on it, spelled correctly, with his title intact, as if the world had finally acknowledged that he had once existed as a soldier. That entire afternoon, Raymond dug through his old suitcase to find his uniform. The jacket had faded, the epaulettes frayed, one button nearly hanging off. But he carefully ironed every crease as if preparing for a mission. Not to fight, but to be seen. He polished his worn black shoes, shaved closely, and sat quietly before the old squad photo. "I'll tell them about you guys," he whispered, as if someone were listening. As night fell, Raymond hung his uniform neatly on the rack, adjusting it just as he used to when he was a sergeant. The small room seemed to glow a little brighter. Inside him, not quite joy, but a quiet anticipation, as if life had finally knocked on his door again after years of silence. Raymond arrived early. No one had told him to, but the military habit stuck. Being on time meant arriving 30 minutes ahead. The Bell Monarch Hotel stood before him like a glass fortress, gleaming and polished, a stark contrast to the worn-down, musty world he had just left behind after a few bus rides. Clutching the invitation tightly, he took a deep breath and stepped toward the main entrance, where a red carpet was already laid out and cameras sparkled with lights. But before he could get far, a young security guard stepped forward to stop him. Dressed in a black suit with an earpiece, the man spoke with a polite but icy smile. "Sorry, sir, the priority list is full. You're on the standby list. Please use the side entrance." Raymond froze. "Standby? But I have an invitation." The guard gave a slight bow. "Yes, sir, that's correct. But this is an event with limited space for high-impact guests. We appreciate your understanding." Just then, a group of younger veterans arrived. Sharp in pristine uniforms, hair neatly styled, badges gleaming. They laughed and chatted confidently, each holding a phone filming a vlog, occasionally winking at the camera. One of them had over 1 million followers on social media. Raymond had seen him on TV. "Please proceed through the main entrance. There's a separate check-in table for VIPs and influencers." The staff member bowed to them, his tone noticeably firmer than when he spoke to Raymond. Raymond stood still, his hand gently tightening around the invitation, as if afraid it might vanish. A silence fell, not because it was quiet, but because he wasn't sure what to feel. Back then, no one asked how many followers he had. Back then, holding the line, saving someone's life, carrying a wounded comrade, that was enough to be called a veteran. But now, he was led down a narrow, dim hallway where the yellow lights buzzed and the old air conditioner hummed. The secondary waiting area was just a small room with a few hard chairs. No red carpet, no cameras, just him, alone, in a worn-out uniform, and a silence no one seemed interested in breaking. He sat down, adjusted his lapel, then looked up at the plain white wall in front of him. Outside, They were giving speeches, toasting, live streaming with glowing words about gratitude, about never forgetting the soldiers. And here in the shadows, a veteran who once saved lives now waited as if he wasn't quite worth remembering. The secondary waiting room had a lone screen hanging loosely on the wall. The live stream from the grand hall played across it. The camera angle was wide, the audio finely tuned, and soft background music played as if everything happening was truly solemn, truly meaningful. No one is forgotten. The slogan scrolled across the bottom of the screen in white font against a deep blue background. Formal, assertive. Raymond saw the dazzling scene he wasn't allowed to enter. Sparkling crystal chandeliers, tables draped in pristine white cloth, crystal glasses raised in elegant toasts. At the center, the stage lit up as a man stepped forward, the senior media representative of the hosting corporation. His tailored suit fit perfectly. His deep red tie nodded just right. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, his voice booming as if the whole country were listening, "we are gathered here today to express our gratitude to our heroes, veterans who have sacrificed in silence for peace." Raymond smirked. In silence, a fitting phrase, he thought, perhaps so silent no one even hears. He continued, "We believe every soldier deserves to be remembered, but today we ask to honor a few exemplary veterans, those who have inspired the younger generation through their valor and influence." The last word came with a smile directed at the front row, where the younger, sharply dressed veterans beamed and waved at the cameras. One of them even lifted his phone to live stream. The live stream. Raymond let out a quiet sigh. He didn't see anyone who looked like his old squad mates there. No Henry, the one who lost a leg saving Raymond from a mine. No Samuel, who wandered for 5 years after the war, unable to find work. No Jenny, the tiny nurse who once shielded a wounded soldier with her own body in the middle of crossfire. They didn't have camera-friendly looks. They didn't have big titles. They didn't have followers on social media. Raymond stood up, picked up the cap from his lap, and started to leave. No one asked him to. The quiet exclusion cut colder than a spoken rejection. But just as he turned to go, a side door down the hallway creaked open. A young woman in a reporter's outfit stepped in, notebook in hand. She hesitated a moment, then walked toward him, eyes polite but unsure. "Excuse me, but are you Raymond Lee, the one who served in Echo 9? He froze. Echo 9. Few remembered that name anymore. He turned slowly and gave a small nod. The young woman clutched her notebook tighter. "Read about you in the military archives. No photos, no interviews. But your story, it stuck with me. Would you be willing to spare me a few minutes?" Raymond was still unsure how to respond to the young reporter when the door opened again. A logistics staff member entered, pushing a cart with bottled water and cold towels. She wore a simple beige uniform, her face glistening with sweat from running back and forth across the auxiliary areas. "Sorry, I'm just bringing water for the overflow lounge," she said quickly, glancing at Raymond, then pausing. Even though he'd taken off his cap and sat quietly in the corner, his faded old uniform still drew attention. "Are you a guest, sir?" she asked, a hint of uncertainty in her voice. Raymond just smiled faintly, saying nothing. He was all too used to being a standby guest at events like these. The young woman sat down beside him and set the tray on the table. "My name's Maya. I'm on shift in the service area today. It's been so busy I haven't even had a chance to look up." Raymond nodded politely, about to stand up and take a walk to ease the tightness in his chest, when Maya softly asked, "Did you serve at Echo 9? Raymond turned sharply, stunned. It was the second time that day he'd heard that name. A remote, forgotten outpost where he and his unit had spent over a year in hell. "My dad was in logistics," Maya said, her voice low. "He used to talk about the harshest places, the ones without news cameras, without war correspondence, just mud, blood, and people almost no one knew." Her eyes grew misty. "He passed away last year, but I remember what he told me. If you ever meet someone who was at Echo 9, thank them. They fought without ever asking for anything." Raymond gripped his cap tighter. His throat tightened. "I think they're doing something wrong," Maya whispered. "They're honoring people with polished YouTube channels, but ignoring those who sacrificed everything and were never named." She handed him a small logistics badge from around her neck. "I can get you in with this. Not to reclaim a seat, but to tell your story. Not for the crowd out there, but for the ones like you who've been forgotten. Raymond went still. There was no pity in Maya's eyes, only respect and a quiet, simmering anger. The world owes you more than a few medals, she said firmly. It's time someone said so. He looked down at his worn uniform. For the first time in years, he felt like there was still something left for him to do. Just minutes after leaving the waiting room, Maya did something she believed was necessary. She cut her shift short, stepped into a quiet corner behind the stage, pulled out her phone, and began putting together the conversation she had with Raymond. Without any edits, just the raw, honest words of an old veteran sitting in a faded uniform in the cold room reserved for the standby list. The video was less than 3 minutes long. No effects, no background music, just Raymond's rough voice recounting his time with Echo 9 and Maya's words, "The world owes you more than a few medals." She gave it a simple title, "The Hero Left Out of the Tribute." In less than an hour, the clip had spread across social media platforms. Some users, including younger veterans, reshared it with emotional outrage. One wrote, "My father served at Echo 9 too. He died without anyone ever knowing his name. When I saw Raymond, it was like seeing my dad again." Hashtags like hashtag no one is forgotten and don't just honor the beautiful began to flood the internet. Netizens dug up images of the ongoing event, plush velvet seats, bright flashlights, guests dressed as if for a gala. Meanwhile, a person who had survived brutal battlefields was left waiting in a side room. Soon after, reporters and independent bloggers at the hotel started receiving messages and links to the video. A mid-level political reporter whispered to a colleague, "If we don't ask about this, tomorrow's online news will blow it up." On the live broadcast, as a politician was mid-speech about fairness and gratitude, the camera accidentally panned to the stands, where some guests began discussing the video they had just watched on their phones. One person raised their phone, speaking loudly, "This is the person who really deserves to be honored. He's out there." A ripple of chatter spread throughout the auditorium. The host hesitated, glancing toward the backstage. On social media, Raymond's name, who had not been on the official list, began to appear, along with thousands of comments expressing outrage and calling for a public apology. In the waiting room, Raymond remained unaware of what was happening. He sat there, hands clasped together, eyes fixed on some distant point. Only Maya, from afar, was watching every response on the screen, her eyes glowing with something bigger than herself. The wave of public opinion was rising, and this time it seemed like no one could stop it. The phone rang incessantly. In the backstage organization room, faces that had once been relaxed suddenly grew tense, eyes fixated on the screen showing the skyrocketing shares of the video, "The Hero Left Out of the Tribute Party." A media assistant gasped, whispering almost as if shouting, "We're trending nationwide. All 3 major news channels have reposted it." An emergency meeting was quickly called in the hallway behind the stage. The PR director, his face as red as a ripe tomato, slammed his phone down on the table and said firmly, "Find that old man. Invite him in. Bring him up on stage. Let him speak. Hand him a shiny certificate." Another assistant hesitated, "But he's not on the official guest list." The head of the organizing committee slammed his hand on the table. Right now, he's the center of social media. Without him, we'll collapse in the public's eyes. Let's make him the symbol of honor of the year, at least until the crisis blows over. Immediately, a member of the reception team was sent to the waiting room. With a professional smile, she bowed before Raymond and said, "We sincerely apologize for the misunderstanding. Please come back to the main stage. The organizing committee would like to present you with a special award and offer you a chance to share a few words with the guests." Raymond froze. He looked up at the young woman, saying nothing. A few seconds later, he stood up, nodded slightly, but his heart was filled with suspicion. How had things turned so quickly? In another corner of the backstage, Maya, still in her staff uniform, was walking past the sound coordination area when she accidentally overheard a conversation between 2 senior managers. "Bring that old man up on stage. Let him say a few emotional words. After the program, thank him, say goodbye, and take the spotlight away from him. If we leave him too long, the internet will dig up more dirt." The other one scoffed, "We'll use his image once, then everything will fade away like usual. It's social media. Tomorrow, something else will happen. like, and no one will remember who he was. Maya stood frozen in the dark, gripping her phone tightly. The anger within her surged. This was no longer the story of an abandoned old man. This was the story of a system that paints gratitude with stage lights, but forgets the human heart behind it. She knew Raymond needed to get on that stage, but not to read the script they had prepared, but to speak the truth about the people who are truly forgotten. The golden lights shone down as the name Raymond Lee was called out with great honor. The luxurious hall, sparkling with crystal lights, erupted in applause, although most of the audience had no real idea who he was. The program organizers smiled professionally, clapping in rhythm, but their eyes never left their phones, monitoring the media response charts. Raymond stepped onto the stage, his gait slow but steady. His military uniform, worn at the shoulders, made each step seem to weigh down the atmosphere in the hall. He took the microphone from the host, who quickly stepped out of the spotlight. On the LED screen behind him, the words appeared, honoring those who sacrificed. Raymond glanced at the paper in his hand, a printed speech, formal, filled with beautiful words like honor, gratitude, and spirit of sacrifice. He slowly folded the paper and tucked it into his jacket pocket. The hall began to murmur. The host leaned backstage, trying to signal him to stick to the script, but Raymond only smiled gently. My name is Raymond Lee. I served for 12 years overseas. I don't have tens of thousands of followers online. I'm not as handsome as a model. I only have part of my back straight and legs that tremble a little. But today, I want to tell you something that isn't in the program. The entire hall fell silent. I received an invitation to come here. I even ironed this uniform, the one that has been with me through 50-degree heat on the battlefield. But when I arrived, I was stopped at the side door. They told me I was on the backup list, that the event already had enough influencers. I was told to wait in a side room, no different from being pushed out of memory. His eyes didn't look at the camera, nor did they look at the celebrities in the front rows. He looked directly at the row reserved for veterans, where a few old men nodded, their eyes wet. I don't need a party. I don't need a shiny certificate handed to me and forgotten behind the lights. I just hope one day those who wore the uniform won't be chosen for their appearance or media value, but simply because they lived, they sacrificed, and they're still trying to survive. He paused, then slowly said, I don't need a party. I need kindness to be practiced, not performed. The atmosphere in the hall froze. No more mechanical applause, no more murmurs. Even those watching the live stream stopped commenting, with only the heart and tears icons flooding the screen. Backstage, Maya silently shed tears. She knew that this moment, even if erased from the official news, would live on in the hearts of those who had been disregarded. And for the first time that night, honoring truly meant something. Raymond declined every offer for re-honoring after his groundbreaking speech. He didn't want his name associated with any attempt to correct the media narrative by anyone. When a company representative showed up at his house with a plaque and a pre-written apology, Raymond simply shook his head. I don't need anything else. I just need you to change the way you treat the rest. He then returned to his everyday life. In the mornings, he still went to the used bookstore at the corner to buy a paper, still tended to the small garden on his porch, and still brewed his own tea with honey that his late wife had liked. But something had changed. This time, the mailbox in front of his house no longer just held bills. Hundreds of handwritten letters, printed emails, and postcards from all over the world came pouring in. Some were signed by a forgotten one, some by young veterans, and others by students who had never known war but thanked him for the life lesson. One Saturday evening, there was a knock on his door. It was a young couple with 2 small children. They brought an apple pie and a simple dinner invitation. The young man said, I never met my dad. He died on the battlefield. But that day, Uncle Raymond said what he never got the chance to say. Veterans around the city, who had long ago stopped gathering together, suddenly sought out Raymond. There were no cameras, no live streams. They simply sat together in his yard, each bringing a dish, sharing stories from their lives that had been kept in their hearts for so long. From these gatherings, a new support group formed, nameless, without major sponsors, only kindness and a commitment to never leaving anyone behind. As for Maya, the logistics girl from that day, she officially left her job in event planning, where everything appeared beautiful on the outside but was hollow inside. With support from the community, she founded a practical charity focused on helping veterans and older workers forgotten by the system. She named the organization Project Raymond. The headquarters was just a small rented room in a regular residential neighborhood, but the first wall held a photo of Raymond, smiling, holding a cup of tea, not standing on a stage, but sitting among a circle of his old comrades. One autumn afternoon, when Maya visited, she brought with her newspapers featuring articles about the new organization. Raymond looked at them for a moment, then smiled softly. Now, I'm really being remembered. Not because I stand out, but because I spoke up at the right moment. Outside, the yellow leaves fell quietly, but in the hearts of those once forgotten, his name had bloomed like a living memory. Simple yet powerful.
Perhaps, in life, each of us will eventually feel forgotten. No longer young, no longer in the spotlight, no longer with achievements that everyone talks about. And sometimes the silence we receive hurts more than any rejection. But you see, Raymond, the old man, unremarkable, without social media, without flowery speeches, taught us something valuable. Respect doesn't always come from the outside. Sometimes it starts with knowing how to speak up for yourself. He wasn't angry, didn't lose his spirit. He simply told the truth in a simple yet unflinching way. And it was that quiet kindness that awakened an entire crowd. We live in a world that sometimes values appearances over depth, but don't let that make you think that kindness, honesty, and dignity are outdated. We need people like Raymond, not because they are perfect, but because they dare to be themselves when it's hardest. So if one day you feel shut out from the door of life, remember, the most important door is the one in the heart of others. And to open it, sometimes all it takes is one sincere word. And I believe you can do that in your own special way. With love, Miss Ellie.